Hello, I'm Tom Loftus, Senior Investment Analyst at Plan Pilot, and with me today are Hal Bjornsson of JP and Catherine Farrell of T. Rowe Price. First and foremost, thank you both for being here today. The topic of discussion is target date funds.
Thank you for having us, and thank you for your time. My name is Catherine Farrell, and I'm a portfolio specialist at T. Rowe Price in the multi-asset division. My role is to sit with the portfolio managers, and I also spend my time out in the field meeting with clients and advisors to talk about what they're hearing in the industry.
I'm Hal Bjornsson. I'm a client portfolio manager with JP Multi-Asset Solutions. I've spent probably the last 25 or 30 years of my career in the defined contribution 401k land, talking to plan sponsors about how to think about menus, working with consultants and advisors, and more recently spending a lot of quality time in target date.
One of the largest distinctions at a high level between any target date fund series is the to versus through glide path orientation approach. Could you provide a brief overview of your varied perspectives on that topic and how you incorporate that glide path orientation into your products?
At T. Rowe Price, our glide paths continue to de-risk for an extended period through retirement, also known as a through glide path. From our perspective, the risk tolerance of investors varies, and the time horizon of your asset allocation should vary both before and after retirement. We believe that the risks that a 65-year-old faces are different than the risks that an 85-year-old faces, especially in perspective of their spending or savings levers. Additionally, our research has shown that risk tolerance decreases with age, and therefore we like to think that lowering the equity level throughout the glide path will continue to match better in terms of that investor comfort as they continue to age.
So at JP we've done a lot of work looking at participant behavior, and one of the things that we have tried to help people understand is that it might be too much of a simplification to say to versus through, because really we believe it's about balancing the risks. For example, a participant who is getting closer to retirement can probably tolerate less market risk than someone who's in their 20s and 30s. Additionally, when we look at the data, you'll see that most participants today, most employees in a 401k plan, take almost all their money out at retirement. So we also have to face the fact that while some people may want to have more equity exposure in retirement, if we're trying to get folks to the place where they can retire, we believe it's appropriate to de-risk the portfolios. And then the third thing I would say is that we've done a lot of work looking at whether a static glide path actually makes sense if people stay in these strategies. And what we found is that, yes, it's true that as people age, their risk tolerance goes down, but their ability to take on risk actually picks up as they age and money is depleting. So we've looked at our static glide path and realized that that inflection point at retirement probably makes the most sense for people, not just up to, but through retirement as they age and we worry about inflation and people outliving their savings.
You've both mentioned the topic of risk a number of times thus far in our questions today. Could you briefly provide an overview or your perspective on prudent risk management in target date funds?
From our perspective, managing towards risk means meeting the objective. So whether that's to support the need for lifetime income or to minimize volatility or the balance of returns, the risk of not meeting one of those objectives is very important. And at the start, our glide path is designed to help address one of those risks. We also believe that being well diversified helps to mitigate risk because you get different risk and return profiles from different asset classes. In addition, we incorporate tactical asset allocation or adjustments each month to take advantage of the opportunity to enhance returns, but also to mitigate risk. And then finally, active management. Active management has the ability to protect on the downside. Unlike passive management, which would allow asset classes to fall just as much as the market, active managers can take steps to mitigate those risks.
So when we look at risks, and this gets back to what I was talking about earlier, it really is thinking about all the risks that a person who's trying to save for retirement is facing. We do have to worry about market risk, but again, for someone who's younger, they can make up for market shortfalls, and in fact, dollar cost averaging of those monthly contributions may work for them. The flip side of that is we also have to worry about longevity and the people outliving their savings. So we do think about having enough equity exposure in there. And then the third thing is we have to address the risks that participants bring on themselves. We look at in our glide path whether people borrow, how much they're saving, when they take their money out. And we incorporate those observations directly into the glide path so that we are diversifying and looking at the appropriate risk exposure, stock, bond, extended asset classes across the glide path based on where people are in their working careers. Yes, we employ tactical asset allocation. We don't look at it necessarily as a risk mitigator, but a way to provide for additional alpha. We believe the risk mitigation comes through understanding the participants and diversifying the strategy and thinking of appropriate levels of risk as people age.
How do you manage fees?
Oh gosh, fees are something that we all have to think about, and as plan sponsors are more and more concerned about participants looking at fees, and frankly, a lot of the stuff that we've seen, not that these lawsuits have necessarily gone forward, but people are looking at fees. To our mind, it's really, as fiduciaries, looking at finding the most cost-effective, efficient strategies, being mindful of where we are from a competitive perspective, but never indexing in places where we believe it's important to be active, and finding cost-efficient strategies is really what it's all about. And then finally, what people need to look at is net of fee performance. We're all going to be, as target date managers, mindful of having competitive pricing, but we also want to make sure that we're delivering net of fee performance that's competitive.
I would agree. I'd also add that we don't charge overlay fees on top of the cost of the underlying strategies. So when you pay the expense ratio on a target date fund, you're actually getting the glide path management and the tactical allocation at no additional cost. At Tier Price, we've continued to lower costs over the years across our franchise by launching additional share classes as well as additional vehicles to help plan sponsors meet different preferences in terms of how they pay for plan expenses. And then the use of passive can come in handy in certain asset classes as a fee lever to help lower overall costs.
What do you see as the main trends for target date funds in the near future?
Well, you mentioned earlier fees, and I think one of the things that everyone recognizes is that people are trying to find more cost-efficient vehicles. So depending on the size of a plan, I think we're seeing more plan sponsors look at target date strategies that offer commingled funds. We're certainly seeing the thinking about a blend of strategies where you have active and passive in a lineup, again, addressing fees. And then we are seeing interest in more specialized vehicles. We're not there yet, but you may start to see a managed account type of strategy within a target date fund exist on a go-forward basis.
There's also custom solutions at the plan level. So there are custom target dates that are designed to meet unique plan characteristics or plan objectives. That's one trend that could be appropriate, and at T. Rowe Price, we think about building custom strategies from several dimensions. One is a custom glide path design or maintenance. Another is partnering with other providers or having an open architecture structure. In addition, managed accounts could be another trend where we are able to bring our glide path framework to the individual level and deliver it through a technical solution.
Do you see any competition from a standalone managed account service as a plan's QDIA versus a target date fund series? And before responding, could you briefly provide an overview of what a QDIA is?
A QDIA is a qualified default investment alternative. And for plans that have auto-enrollment or want to default participants into an investment, they have three options. One is a target date, another is a balanced fund, and a third is a managed account. And versus a balanced fund, a target date has the benefit of including a glide path. So the asset allocation will change over time. Relative to a managed account, which also has a glide path typically, and is also a diversified portfolio, having a managed account solution as a default may lead to some issues, as participants who are defaulted into a solution might be less engaged. And really the benefit of a managed account is its customization. And if participants aren't adding as many data points to customize the solution, they might not be harnessing all of the capabilities of that service.
Yeah, I think in terms of from a competitive perspective, we actually haven't seen that much uptake in managed accounts as a qualified default investment alternative. And I think one of the issues is absolutely engagement, because unless you are providing more detailed information to the managed account product, you're essentially limiting the ability of that managed account to diversify your assets to just what you have in your 401k plan without considering anything else. And then the other thing, frankly, from a competitive perspective and using this as a qualified default investment alternative, is that there's an overlay fee, which doesn't exist with target date funds. So you're paying for not just the underlying funds or vehicles that you're using, but also a fee for that management of that account.
Target date assets today are really concentrated amongst a few large managers. Do you see this as something good for the industry? And what might a new entrant have to do to gain traction?
So I guess in terms of concentration in the industry, a lot of money right now is with passive providers, and that's been driven more by fees, I would argue, than actually looking at the merits of that glide path. So that's number one. Number two, the Department of Labor and others did a pretty good job over the years of trying to get plan sponsors to think about their target date option and whether that was a selection that was just based on who the record keeper was at the time. And what we've actually seen, even though there might be a concentration of assets, there are actually more offerings today from different asset managers than there were years ago. And so a plan sponsor does have, working with a consultant advisor, actually a fair number of options to choose from. In terms of barriers to entry, though, I think we're at a point where it's a fairly mature space. We've seen target date funds now in place, in plans for, going on 12 years, or if not longer. And so for a new entrant to look at getting into managing money in a 401k plan as a qualified default investment alternative without a track record and assets that have backed it up, I think it's very challenging right now.
I agree. The industry really continues to evolve and remain very competitive. There's over 60 target date providers now in the industry. And for a new entrant, they would have to be very competitive and offer something that the current providers don't have. Especially given that so many plan objectives are being met by the current offerings, I think it would be very tough to break into.
Thank you both again very much for being here today and sharing your perspectives on the topic of target date funds.
My pleasure. Thank you for having us.
Thank you, and great questions.
In our audience, if you're looking for more perspective on target date funds or investing in general, please do not hesitate to reach out to Plan Pilot, and we'll be happy to assist. Thank you.